Hello everyone, this is Anas. Today we will discuss poem Kubla Khan by S.T. Coleridge. The video is divided into the following parts like the summary, our vision in a dream, a fragment, beauty and violence, exotic poem, willing suspension of disbelief, themes in poem, romantic poem, the use of symbols, meter and rhyme. We will discuss all these things in this video. Let's first go through the summary of a poem. In place called Xanadu, Kubla Khan orders his servants to build a palace for recreation and pleasure on the bank of River Elf. The river runs through caves that are so vast and profound that no one can measure them. They also create a space of around 10 miles. This is fertile earth surrounded by walls and towers. In this land, there are gardens with sunny streams and aromatic trees. There are forests in the middle. The place is very beautiful and impressive. There is a narrow valley between hills surrounded by cedar trees. This place is very scary and wild. This is haunted by a woman waiting for a demon lover under the crescent moon. Out of the narrow valley, water is intermittently discharged, and it looks like the ground is breathing. The violent energy of river makes the rocks dancing. The holy river runs through woods and fields before reaches to the deep ocean. Amid the jarring and rushing sounds of water, Kubla Khan hears the ancestral voices prophesying wars. The shadow of the palace is reflected by waves. Khan's palace is sunny and has icy caves. In a vision, the speaker sees a woman from Ethiopia. She has a string instrument, a dulcimer, and sings a song. The speaker says that if I could recreate the sounds within myself, then it would make me so joyous that I can make Khan's palace in the air. Everyone will see how I built a palace in the sky, and they will cry out, look at his flashing eyes and floating ear." Or a vision in a dream, a fragment. Why and how this poem is a fragment and why it is not? There are two opinions. One is that a poem is a fragment, and it's also discussed in the poem in the first line, a vision in a dream, a fragment, while some of the authors have the opinion that not the poem is a complete piece and it is not a fragment. The poem Kubla Khan is considered a fragment. Why it is considered a fragment? Because it is a fragment of an irregular piece from an opium-influenced dream. The poem is a fragment because the actual vision is 300 lines, but the Coleridge only manages to write 54 lines. In contrast, some of the authors like Humphrey House say that poem is complete and not a fragment. Further, George Sainsbury says that Kubla Khan is a series of pictures in which the images and every image are beautifully crafted. So Kubla Khan is considered a fragment because it is a piece from a vision of 300 lines, while the authors like Humphrey and Sainsbury says that the poem is complete and every image is beautifully crafted, so it is not a fragment. In poem, we see that there is use of pleasure and violence in the same time. every time when there is a pleasure, there is a violence. So let's discuss the pleasure and violence. We will also discuss the pleasure and violence in theme, but let's first go through it here. The main focus of the poem is to show us the pleasure dome of Kubla Khan, that is on the bank of the river, surrounded by caves having forests, aromatic trees, and sunny streams. But the poem is also not free from violence. It focuses on the violent energy of river, rocks are dancing, the land is breathing, which is natural threat for a palace. All these things like the dancing rocks, the breathing land, and the intermittent burst of water is natural threat for a palace. The palace also faces a personal threat, which is Kubla Khan's ancestral voices prophesying war. The poem shows that wherever there is pleasure, there is violence. It means that pleasure and violence go side by side. We will also discuss the pleasure and violence in themes. The poem Kubla Khan is considered exotic poem. Why it is considered exotic poem and what does exotic mean? Exotic means that anything which is not local. When a place is distant and foreign, it is an exotic. In this poem, Coleridge uses exotic language and powerful imageries that create a sense of otherness. One exotic quality of the poem is that it is charged with Eastern names like Kubla Khan and Abyssinia. The second is that the poem uses decontextualized names like River Elf and Xanadu. These places are unknown to everyone and do not exist. These are invented places that exist in Coleridge's poem, so these names create exoticness because these places do not belong to any specified context. Everyone can relate to these places in a different way. Further, the Coleridge use of images like a sunless sea, a woman waiting for a demon lover, and a Abyssinian maid playing dulcimer are all exotic elements. So, this poem is exotic because there are Eastern names, decontextualized names, distant places, and some savage imageries which makes the poem exotic. And we will further discuss that what is the advantage of all these exotic elements. Like, now the question is that why Coleridge uses Eastern names, decontextualized names, heightened savage imageries, and why he uses exotic elements. It is it is because anything which is not local is not easily accessible. So when you cannot access something, then you have to accept it, even if it looks so unreal. Coleridge willingly suspends our disbelief by using Eastern names, decontextualized names, savage imageries, and exotic elements. So, by using exotic elements and distant places and all those elements, Coleridge willingly suspends our disbelief. And willing suspension of disbelief is when you examine something unreal or impossible in reality. So, the advantage of these exotic elements is willing suspension of disbelief. Now let's go through some important themes in poem Kubla Khan. The poem describes Kubla Khan pleasure palace with all beauties and luxuries, but it also focuses on the violent energy of poem. We also discussed it earlier, but let's go through violence and pleasure again. But it also focuses on the violent energy of poem, and Kubla Khan ancestors prophesying war, what it shows? It shows that pleasure and beauty is a result of conflict between opposing forces, and the pleasure which Kubla Khan seeks is a result of interaction between opposite forces. It also tells us that where there is a pleasure, we cannot exclude violence. So, the palace of Kubla Khan is full of pleasures, full of recreation, but still, we cannot exclude violence. It means that pleasure and violence go side by side, and wherever you find pleasure, there will be always some sort of violence. The second theme is the theme of mm, creativity. The poem itself is an example of profound creativity. Reader can feel how the poet arranges those irregular images in one piece. Poem also let us know that creativity is precious, but it has certain limits. This is the limits of creativity. Like it is difficult to sustain. The poem has vision of 300 lines, but after some interruption, he has lost vision and only manages to write 54 lines. So creativity is difficult to sustain. We have four important themes. First is pleasure, second is violence, then we have creativity and limits of creativity. Kubla Khan is romantic poem. And what are the romantic elements in poem Kubla Khan? Let's go through some romantic elements of poem Kubla Khan. Kubla Khan is romantic poem because it celebrates nature. The poem has various supernatural qualities like what is first let's first go through what is supernaturalism. Supernaturalism transports us from everyday life and creates atmosphere of misery and fear. In poem, example of supernaturalism are women wailing for demon lover ancestral voices, prophesying war, deep romantic chasm, Telmus rise of river, the cavern modulus to man, the intermittent burst of water and a sunless sea. The poem has also suggestive praise like which is the romantic quality like the bright gardens, trees with sweet blossoms, the sunny spot greenery, the Abyssinian maid playing dulcimer, and the Magellan caverns. The poem also has sensuousness, which is the deep description of nature like the aromatic trees, sweet blossoms, forests, bright gardens, and many more. There are some symbols which I would like to discuss in the poem Kubla Khan, like the river Ulf is associated with creative powers, gardens symbolize rationality, the sunless sea is symbol of satisfaction, and the ancestral voices symbolizes that violence cannot be escaped even in the beauties of palace. Now, the last part of our video is meter and rhyme. If we see the rhyme of poem, it's very irregular, like the images are irregular in the poem, same as that of rhyme. So we have one sort of rhyme in first stanza and then different it's a different rhyme and irregular rhyme over the course of poem. And the meter is there are three important meters in the poem like the iambic pentameter, iambic trimeter, and iambic tetrameter. So this is all about poem Kubla Khan. We have discussed summary, how poem is fragment, what is beauty and violence, how the poem is exotic, what how the poem suspends how the poem willingly suspends our disbelief, what are the themes in poem, Roma- how and how the poem is romantic and what are the romantic elements in the poem, what are some symbols, and what is meter and rhyme of poem. So this is all about poem Kubla Khan. Thank you very much for watching, and I think and I believe that the video will be helpful and the video is able to clear all the queries about poem Kubla Khan. Thank you very much.